Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk about order of operations and solving equations. So number one, the directions just say to simplify. So you have to notice a couple things. The first thing I notice is that I have two fractions and then 100 seconds, which is just a whole number. So when I multiply fractions, I like all parts to be fractions. So I'm going to put that over 1. Secondly, I said multiply. Well, I know it's multiplication because those parentheses are right next to each other and there's no other operation listed. There's no plus, minus, or division symbol. So we know that we have to multiply. So now I have three different fractions that I'm going to multiply together. Well, before I multiply that out, I like to see if anything will cancel. See if my life can get a little bit easier. Well, I see a foot on the bottom and a foot on the top, so those get to cancel. It just says seconds here, but we know that's 1 second. So I have a seconds on the bottom and a seconds on the top. So that just leaves me with 12 inches times 12 times 100. And it's all ones on the bottom, so I really don't need to do anything with those right now, but you could. So remember, in a fraction, you multiply across the top, across the numerators, and you multiply across the denominators. So you're really with 12 times 100, and don't forget about those inches, over 1. But we all know you don't have to write over 1. So if I do 12 times 100, you can take out your calculators. 12 times 100. Hopefully you're doing this with me. You get 14,400 inches. Don't forget your units. All right, number 2, evaluate the expression. So when they say to evaluate any expression, we have to remember our order of operations, which I know you've learned before, but just a reminder, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And we follow these in general from left to right. But specifically, multiplication and division, multiplication doesn't necessarily always come first. Before division, we do it from left to right, whichever order they appear. And same with addition and subtraction. So it just depends on what the problem gives you. So we can look at number 2 and see. First, we have parentheses. So here I have a 3 minus 4 inside parentheses. So I'm going to do that first. I have 2. 3 minus 4 is negative 1 squared. I'm going to go minus 5 divided by negative 1. I'm just writing this down. And I have 4 times 2 minus 1. So I need to do that 4 times 2 minus 1 because parentheses comes first. So now do I do 4 times 2 or 2 minus 1? Well, multiplication definitely always comes before subtraction. So I have 8 minus 1. And again, that translates to, I'm going to just keep write the rest of it down. 8 minus 1 is 7. So now I got rid of parentheses. Now, what you could do is you could cross it out so you can keep track. Whatever works best for you. Now I got exponents. Well, negative 1 squared. Well, negative 1 squared is negative 1 times negative 1. So that's really like 2 times positive 1 minus 5 divided by negative 1 times 7. So I continue on with my order of operations, multiplication and division from left to right. So I'm just going to go through left to right and do those operations. So 2 times 1 is 2. Then I have negative 5 divided by negative 1 is 5 times 7. Multiplication first, 5 times 7 is 35, and 2 plus 35 is 37. So maybe you skipped ahead and you tried this problem, but make sure you go back and you get 37 as your answer, and you know why. The next problem, it says to evaluate the expression such that x equals 5 and y equals negative 2. So the first thing we have to do is substitute those values in. So negative 8, y is negative 2, plus 5 is x, minus 2, and then 3 times 5 minus negative 2. I'm just substituting in the values. And now I follow my order of operations. Parentheses first. Negative 2 plus 5 is 3. Inside the parentheses, 3 times 5 is 15, plus 2 is 17. So negative 8 times 3 is negative 24, and 2 times 17 is 34. And if you need to take out your calculator for this one, no problem. It's negative 58. So make sure if there's anything that you're not understanding right now, you rewind and you rewatch that, any examples, 1, 2, or 3, before you move on uh, to number 5, which looks like I got my numbers wrong. This is actually number 4, and this is number 5. So I have an equation. Solve the equation. Remember, that means we want to get our variable, whatever it is, all by itself. That's the whole point. So we have to undo anything that was done. So first, I'm going to get rid of this negative 4/5. Hopefully you remember how to do that. You need to multiply by the reciprocal, which is negative 5/4. So those cancel. Remember, you have to do what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So you're left with negative 7/4x plus 9/10 equals. Now, don't be scared. Fractions are not scary because we have nice, awesome calculators that help us out. If you're not sure what to do, you could multiply by hand. Remember, multiplying means across the numerator and across the denominator. But I have 13/20. Make sure you always use parentheses. 13/20 times negative 5, divided by 4. And I have a decimal. That's okay. I like to keep my answers in fractions because it was given in fractions and it's a little bit more exact. We don't have to round. So to do that, math, enter, enter. So I'm at negative 13/16. So negative 13/16. And then I keep going. Remember, my goal is to get that x by itself. So I have to undo everything that was done. And it's nice, if you really want to, you can think about this order of operations, but backwards, anytime we solve for an equation. So I'm going to start with subtraction or addition. Well, I have a plus 9/10. So how do I undo plus? Well, I got to subtract it. That's how I'm going to move it. That's what's going to make it 0. So minus 9/10. Be careful if you're going to do this by hand. When you subtract fractions, you need a common denominator. I'm just going to put that right in my calculator. Negative 13/16. Make sure you always use parentheses. Minus 9/10. And again, I want a fraction. Math, enter, enter. So I have negative 137/80. So negative 7/4x equals negative 137/80. Now here is where you might forget what we're really doing. But remember, multiplication and then division come next. So I have to undo this multiplication, right? Negative 7/4 times x. So don't write this down quite yet, but I could really divide both sides by negative 7/4. That's really what we're doing, but we don't really like to divide by fractions, so we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, negative 4/7. Remember, that's the exact same thing. So those go away, and I'm left with x. So I need to multiply by negative 4/7. You can always just hit times, right? The answer, which is negative 137/80, times negative 4/7. Math, enter, enter, right? We always want a fraction. So 137/140. Don't be scared. Fractions are always okay as answers. For the last one, solve the formula for the indicated variable. So this says solve for B1. So we have to be careful. We have to make sure we know exactly what we're solving for. And B1 is right here. So I need to get that all by itself. So there's a couple things we can start. I'm going to start with this 1/2. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So now I can't multiply 2 and a together to get a number or anything, but I could leave it as 2 times a. Totally fine. B1 plus B2 times h. So how do you undo multiplication? Well, you divide on both sides. So 2a/h equals B1 plus B2. And you just have to be extra careful you're solving for the right variable. Remember, I'm looking for that B1. So how do I move a positive B2? Well, I subtract B2 from both sides. So I have a 2a divided by h minus B2 equals B1. Where all I got to do is get that by itself. You're applying the exact same concepts you would if these were all numbers, except they're variables. So we have to leave our answer as 2a over h minus b2. So I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned something awesome today. Again, if you have any questions, you need to write them down on your note sheet or on your in your notebook, and make sure that you re-watch any problems that you had. And I bet if you do that, give yourself some time, you can understand it before class. See you then.